Welcome to the Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by the Gimp. Now that guy knows at the party. Let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everybody to the Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by G-Men World War. Made with actual superheroes, take the A-Train to victory in G-Men World War. Now playing in a theater near you. Welcome everybody to the Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're back. We're doing the thing again. We are filmmakers, writers, actors, directors. We do all kinds of things, music, and we use all that info, insight to try to deconstruct films in a way that helps you understand the whole filmmaking process. Maybe you're an artist and you like to hear different ways of attacking a problem or a story or a creative idea, creative approach. I always think it's funny. I mean, we have our audience is mostly artists. I feel like there's probably a handful of people who just enjoy hearing kind of shop talk, but we really do have a lot of creatives, but not just filmmakers. Like we have actual artists, like painters, and other people who are talented and behind the camera with photography. And I just really music. We have, a lot of musicians who listen in. And so it's really interesting, I think, just the ways that we find inspiration to carry into our own work. Some people do marketing, and I find as a writer and director, like I find a lot of inspiration outside of film. Like it's hard for me to watch a film without doing what we do every episode of just kind of trying to see under the hood. And so whenever I need to get inspiration, I might turn to books or video games. And for me, that's like I get to consume a story without thinking about necessarily all the ways that the story is operating and all the ways the cinematography is playing into it, right? I'm never going to write a novel. So picking up whatever Joyce, not that I've read Joyce, but I could, Herman Melville, and really dive into it, find inspiration in the story and some of the themes without feeling like, oh, I see he's setting up this chapter by doing X, Y, Z, or that was a thesis statement that's going to come back, right around the midpoint or whatever. Like, I don't have any of those problems. I don't know. Where do you, as a musician and as a producer, are you finding inspiration outside of your actual zone of what you're doing?
I think that's because with pretty much all forms of art, I can't think of any off the top of my head that wouldn't apply to this, but they extend good art extends beyond its own medium, right? So I don't just listen to music to get inspiration, to write music or vice versa. I mean, when I watched The Whale, I was inspired to come home and make a piece of music, and I did that, and that was from a film, but the inspiration didn't come from the music from the film. It just came from the feelings that I had watching this and what I felt like I wanted to do. Like I wanted to do something. And when I want to do something, usually it's sit down and work on music, but not always. So yeah, I think the best art and the best ideas come from when you're able to like be present and notice what's around you, right? Because there's so much around you, and I think that I'm a bad culprit of this, where I'll just go through my day because I have so much I'm doing. I'll just go through my whole day, and then at the end of the day, I'll look up and think, what just happened? The day is gone, and I it's like when you're driving from point A to point B and you don't realize how you got to point B. Well, you're almost on autopilot, and that's going to happen to us all. We can't focus on everything we're doing all the time. Just like you can't focus on the way your clothes feel, because your brain would just go crazy. It shuts things off. But you got to remind yourself, like, be present in that moment. Like, oh, what did she just say? Oh, that's a cool word. That's a cool phrase. Maybe I should write that down. Remember that. Or, oh, that's an interesting idea that, he just ran in that direction and this happened and, oh, interesting. But if you don't look up, then you miss it. So yeah, I try to get inspiration all the time, but I also have a lot going on, and I have to remind myself to come back down to earth and notice it. You know what I mean? It's all around us.
It is. It is hard to come down sometimes from the inane somewhat, right? Like driving to and from work or doing the dishes, whatever. And I feel like some cultures probably do a really good job of using those kind of actions as a meditation. And like, it's like, okay, just because I'm not enjoying this doesn't mean I can't get anything out of it. And then it's like, the shower effect, where if you let your senses become dulled, your mind can really go to new places and interesting places. And there's inspiration there too. And I think for me, a lot of it is also trying to be disciplined enough whenever I'm having those moments to recognize, what is it inspiring? If I can get that down somewhere, whether it's on paper or lock it into some story in my head that I can then chew on for the next few months, or just sometimes, like as an actor, I'm always trying to understand, what did that feel like just now? I just got hit with an emotion. What happened inside my body? Like if you want to cry on screen, that's really hard, and without going to some mechanical tricks, right? The whole don't close your eyes, pinch yourself, whatever, those kind of things. The Joey method of tweezers in your pocket, and just start pulling. And instead, like if you can understand some of the physiological things that happens in your body when you're experiencing something like crying, your breath shortens, it's in your chest, and you can start to reverse engineer these things so that whenever you need to call upon them as an actor, you can trigger those things because you understand your emotions are tied to your physicality. And if the more you can understand what's happening in your body, the more you can recreate the external emotions by first triggering what's happening in your body on purpose. Yeah. And so there's inspirations everywhere. Like if you're mindful, and I'm as 100% as guilty as anyone else about the going from A to B and like, what just happened? Like time warp. But life can move really, really fast if you don't sit and actually, to Bueller it a little bit, if you don't look around every once in a while. It's important. Yeah. So what piece of life are we looking at today, man?
Yeah, so today we're talking about The Whale, Brendan Fraser's comeback performance. If you haven't seen this film, please pause the episode and go watch it. It might still be in theaters wherever you are. It might not be. Hopefully, you'll be able to rent it or stream it soon if it's not. But yeah, we're going to spoil a bunch of stuff.
For sure. I don't have a ton on my plate, but I definitely want to look at some of the cinematography, the way they use the aspect ratio, and then also look at some of the directing, acting, performances, a little bit of the writing. I wasn't sure we were going to do this one. And so every time something popped up on my podcast feed, I listened to it. And so I'll try to recall the stuff I've heard Darren Aronofsky talk about, as well as Samuel D. Hunter, who wrote the play and the screenplay. And they had some really interesting insights about what they were thinking while they were creating this. And so I'll try to remember what I learned from those guys, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. A reclusive, morbidly obese English teacher attempts to reconnect with his estranged teenage daughter. Directed by Darren Aronofsky. Written by Samuel D. Hunter. Cinematography by Matthew Libatique. Featuring Brendan Fraser as Charlie, Sadie Sink as Ellie, Chau as Liz, Ty Simpkins as Thomas, and Samantha Morton as Mary.
She saved him. She wasn't trying to hurt him. She was trying to help him.
Who are you talking about?
He's going home. She did that.
Charlie.
She didn't do it to hurt him. She did it to send him home.
Do you feel lightheaded, Charlie? Look at me.
She's trying to help him.
Who?
Ellie. She was trying to help him. She just wanted to send him home. Do you ever get the feeling that people are incapable of not caring? People are amazing.
All right. And go. Oh, I'm shredded already.
I know.
How did it hit you? Like, did you go in just blank slate and let it wash over you? What was your experience in the theater?
Yeah, so I was the only one in the theater. There was no one else there. Yeah, because I caught literally the last showing. You know, like I told Jenny, I'm sorry, I gotta go to the movies tonight, and caught the last showing. I was the only one in the theater, and yeah, it was intensely simple and beautiful, and I mean it's pretty much one location, you know, the entire time. And the way it starts is fantastic. Just the opening scene is just brutal. It's the first time where it's also the first time when I couldn't finish my popcorn. I like literally had to stop eating. I was like, I can't do this. I can't while I'm watching him basically kill himself, you know.
That's so interesting.
I thought
Let's
it was
come back to that later. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't know what to expect. I mean, I expected a great performance from him just because of all the news and the hubbub and everything about, you know, around that. But I didn't have any idea what the story was, you know, the reference to the whale, like why it's called the whale. I mean, it's obviously an morbidly obese guy, but is that referencing him? Is that referencing, you know, an actual whale? And obviously, you know, there's the Moby Dick reference, but I also wondered, like the thing I was curious about was in that scene specifically, you know, where he says, you know, do you ever wonder, you know, if people are incapable of not caring? You know, in the previews, that never hit me. Like it almost felt contrived a little bit in the previews, because I was thinking, like, what is he just like a you know, a guy that life has crushed, and yet he's like Job and he just takes it, you know? Like, I hope not.
Yeah.
I hope not. Cause then that I don't like guys like that.
Yeah.
Like that. I can't
Just getting rolled
relate.
over.
Yeah. I can't relate to people like that. And so I was nervous that, is it going to be one of those? And I just, you know, whatever. But then, you know, no, you realize like he wasn't always like this. And he's doing this to himself on purpose. Obviously, I mean, yes, there's times where he's questioning doing it and he tries to stop, but really it's just in passing, you know? And so to me, it was fantastically executed. I felt like, well, first off, let me just address Brendan's performance. I thought it was, I mean, fantastic, Oscar caliber. You know, I absolutely think that you could tell he did research. You could tell that he gave 100%. You could tell that, you know, in those scenes where he's trying to stand up, that, I mean, I don't know. I'll say, I don't know what it's like to try to stand up as, you know, a 600-pound person, but I could tell that looked very real, his struggle, and that when he would fall or slip or something like that, it looked like he really hurt himself. Like it was flawlessly executed from an acting standpoint, but also from a cinematography standpoint. I thought the angles were really, really great and important. These moments of like, they did a good job of like putting him in these moments that would be very simple for you or I. The key falling on the ground, you know, to work out But for him, that's a huge deal, you know, putting him in those situations, and he can't fit through the door to get into his partner's old room. You know, like these situations that limit him, even though he's right there. He's right at the cusp, but he can't do it. Right. Which is important, because then in his decision to continue doing that, right, shows what most of the time any story would be frustrating. In this case, beautiful, right? The only thing he can do for his daughter is this, right? Is what he thinks. And so, which I disagree with, but it's what he thinks. And that's his way out. And his way back into her life in some form or fashion, even if it's after he's passed. That was beautiful. What's her name?
Sadie
Chau.
Oh yeah, Liz. Yeah,
like she was not acting. I will just say that. Like she was fantastic. She was probably, other than Brendan Fraser, my favorite part of this film.
Wow.
You know, I just loved her anger and her frustration and her hurt when she found out that he actually has money, and kept coming back even after that. Because what are you going to do? You love somebody, you really do, and you know that they're dying. You're not going to stay away, no matter what. You know, I thought that the writing was strong to bring her back, and to, even if she didn't forgive him, it didn't matter if she forgave him or not. She was there, she's just fantastically strong in this film. I thought that I honestly was not crazy about Sadie's performance. I don't think that it was bad. I just felt very like a little bit like how I felt with her in Stranger Things. She just had, it's the same role. She's just this angry teenager, and in some cases all over the place. Too much, right? I felt like she was overacting, honestly. Yeah. And which sucks, because I think she's a great actress, and I think that if she were to just pull it back a little bit, it would be so much more believable, you know? I don't know if that's because she was directed to do that, or if that's just how she is, because I feel like that might be just how she is, because that's how she was in Stranger Things. But I don't know. I was able to look past that, because she wasn't on screen a lot. Like, it wasn't like all about her. It was mostly about Brendan. So anyway, but yes, I thought it was fantastically beautiful, and the way that it ended was so beautiful. And, you know, I mean, my wife is an English teacher, so his love of truth and honesty, and I mean, you know, it could be about writing. It could be just about creativity in general, which is kind of how I took it, as creativity in general and being honest, which is why after it, I came home and I just had to sit down and write something. And so I wrote this thing, and it felt really good, because it's the first thing I wrote since recording the album. And I didn't give a shit, you know, like if it was good or if anybody liked it. I was going to make something, I was going to put it out. And it just felt really good and honest. And I think that film helped me. It was what I needed in that moment to remind me, like, just create, just turn off your brain and make something real and honest. And don't make it because you think that people will like it, or that even you will like it. Just do something. And it's like super inspiring, which is great. And hopefully that's the reason, that's like the purpose of it, is to remind people that, like, be real, be honest. Don't do something because you think you don't make something because you think I want to hear it or see it. You know, I mean, I think that all the best filmmakers are like that. They make films for themselves first, because they're the film lover first. And then hopefully other people like it. Yes, you want everybody to love it. Of course. I don't care who you are. You want everybody to love it, but you can't make stuff for other people. You have to make it for yourself. You know, Moby Dick was not written for you and me. It was definitely not. And there's probably 100 pages that say that, you know? So yeah. Anyway, I thought it was brilliant. It was wonderfully done. If he wins an Oscar, it's very well deserved. I love his comeback story. He's such a wonderful person. He seems like a wonderful person, and deserving, and yeah, it's a great film. Great film for him. I'm glad that he had this opportunity. So
same. He was saying, Aronofsky was saying that he had been trying to get this produced for, I don't know, 8-10 years, something like that. And
my God,
got close a couple times and then just couldn't find the right actor for it. And, and he saw Brendan in some show. I already forgot what show it is. I haven't seen it. And he was like, oh man, Brendan Fraser. Yeah. You know what? And I think they just had a conversation about it and he was gung ho. And I agree, man. Like, definitely wouldn't mind seeing him pick up a statue. Worth it. And yeah, I walked into this, I just go see all of Aronofsky's films, whether or not I'm excited about it. Like, I was not excited about Mother, but went to see it nonetheless. And it was a weird experience because I realized very quickly, he didn't write this. Like, I could just hear the way everyone was talking. And I was like, this does not sound like an Aronofsky script. And so part of me, 5-10 minutes in, just began to anticipate the credits. Like, I was just like, I need to have this confirmed or I'm crazy. One of the two is happening right now.
Oh, so you didn't know that he didn't write it?
I had no idea.
Okay.
Because he writes and directs all his own stuff. Like, I don't think he's ever directed someone else's script before, to my knowledge anyway. And so I just kept waiting, to see, like, okay. And then the other thing I realized about 10 minutes in, I was like, oh, this is a play. This feels like a play. It's being treated like a play. This is an adapted play, and that's why. So maybe he adapted someone else's screenplay, but I just don't think he would write this way. The dialogue is very not Aronofsky. And I couldn't define what that even is, but it's the old adage, I'll know it when I see it. And so, yeah, it was really interesting just to watch him directing someone else's words and screen. And you could feel the staginess of it. And I think that was a good part of why Sadie Sink felt out of sync. Sorry, no pun really not intended. Like,
yeah,
she just really, felt off a lot of the time. The times when she felt amazing, she looked like she was pulling everyone in, was those moments when she was still. And those I really loved watching her watch him.
Yes.
You just start to imagine all these feelings that you have as a daughter watching your father having turned into this while he's been away. He's been out of sight for a few years and now suddenly he's this. How is she processing that? And all these emotions and feelings are happening just while she's sitting still. And it felt like every time she moved, it didn't feel like she had to move. It felt like she moved because she wanted to move. And those are two different experiences on the screen.
Like you might if it was on a stage.
Yes. Right.
You know what I mean? Because you need movement and stuff to interaction, but in a film, not necessarily. So good point.
Move whenever your character has to absolutely move, and not a second before. Don't talk until your character absolutely has to speak. As opposed to, Liz Hong Chau, who early, I would say like her first scene or two, I was still on that same page of I'm not buying her. And then she settled in and she destroyed me. Like, she has that monologue where she tells Thomas, like, actually, don't go yet. You and I need to have a talk. and he tries to leave a few minutes later. She's like, nope, not yet. We're going to have that talk. And then she finally pulls him outside and she gives him the monologue about what happened to her brother and the exposition of why everything is happening the way it's happening. And suddenly I'm shredded. I'm like, oh my God, Thomas, you need to crawl into a hole right now, buddy, because she is handing you your ass. And he does a great job of like responding to that for sure. And yeah, from that moment on, Liz definitely had me just watching her in that scene, that soundbite we played. Like, that's half the reason I'm getting shredded. But obviously Brendan Fraser just going there is the other half, because whenever he's talking and he's so not Joe, but he is this relentless optimist. And his wife calls him out on that. Oh, still the optimist. But you buy it. You just believe this guy's been handed the worst and he is still going. He still believes in people. He still believes in his daughter. Man, if that doesn't like pull you apart, if you can watch this movie and not love Charlie, my God, maybe there is no hope. Maybe if there's one person that isn't a sociopath that can watch this and not be absolutely moved, maybe we're doomed. Maybe that's that. I don't know what else, to put in front of someone.
Well, they do a good job of humanizing him too. And he's not just a dumb guy who's like, I'm just going to be happy and take it all the time. I mean, he gets mad at Thomas is his name.
Yeah. The church boy.
When Thomas says something about, his partner, that's why he died or whatever, because he didn't accept Christ or something.
He turned his back on God. That's why.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. He got really mad at him and he attacked him verbally, and to show that. And I think that was probably one of the most important parts of the movie for me, because it made me see Charlie as an actual human being that anybody could be. Even somebody who like loves all people and thinks that people are all good, he can still get angry, and he's allowed to be angry. He's allowed to express that anger in a way that hurts people, right? Because up until then, he's just this guy who's like, oh, how could you not love Charlie? Well, he was kind of a shitbag, he, at some point, like he left. And yes, he has his reasons and stuff. And he's like, well, I did send money and I sent more and I tried to contact you and stuff. Like, come on, he didn't try hard enough. He could have tried harder. And he admits that. And he admits that but we never see that. We just hear him say all these things. So to actually see him hurt somebody else or to try to hurt somebody else, I think is like super important to humanize him. And it was kind of like a defining moment for him as a character or a humanizing moment for him as a character that made me like really identify with him even more, because now, okay, he's come back down to earth. He's not just this, pious, guy who can do no wrong because I haven't seen him do any wrong. You know what I mean? Even if I've heard that he's done wrong. So
I think that's a really, really great point, because it's easy to create this character that is all of one thing or another. Like, oh, overweight people can be such a punchline in films and throughout most of our lives. That's what overweight people were. It was something to point and laugh at and make a joke at their expense, right? Oh, I'm setting this girl up with a hot date, and then this whatever out of shape guy shows up, and that's the definition of ugly now. And so it becomes very easy to try to swing this whole other direction where you make the perfect guy. He just happens to be morbidly obese. And instead, no, let him defend himself. He has a perspective. And just because he's really embraced this attitude of love, which is a really great contrast, because you have Thomas representing kind of religion and spirituality, and who's trying to save Charlie's soul. And then you have Charlie, who's actually embodying all those things. He's actually embodying, grace and love and endurance. And he's the one who's really trying to save Charlie's soul, Thomas's soul, because Thomas is, he's missing it. He doesn't really understand what all those things are. All he knows is how to follow someone else's path. He doesn't know how to blaze his own trail that is really steeped in love and grace. And there's something interesting that happens between Thomas and Charlie, which is Thomas early on is trying to persuade Charlie, right? And he's like, but don't you see, if you do this, if you believe, like, you'll get a new body made of light. Don't you want that? And at the end of the film, two things are true. One is that Charlie has not converted. the other thing is he does get his body of light. Like that's that last moment whenever he rises up and he's light as a feather and light engulfs him. Like that's him, you know, finally finding peace and rest. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And death, like he dies. But
I love. Can I just point out
Please.
something that you said earlier that I never noticed, and I think is also super important. You said grace and love and endurance. I did not look at it like that, and that is absolutely, I think maybe the best word you can use to describe his character and this film in general is just endurance, in whatever that might be. Endurance just to get through life, or endurance because you have a goal and you have to work towards that goal. I mean, there were moments in that film where, you know, he was like, I'm not going to eat this. But then his endurance was to eat it. He was purposefully doing that. And even when he felt like, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm going to do it, because his goal, he had set out for this, to do this to himself since losing his partner, maybe even before that, you know, but it got really difficult for him to do it. And he knew he was hurting Liz, and he knew he was hurting his daughter, and everything, but he wanted to do it for her, for the money, but to give her the money, but also because he wanted to off himself. Like that's what I got from it. And it was interesting. I was having a conversation with Jenny the next night. We went to dinner. We were talking about it. She's like, yeah, I was reading about it, and a lot of people are like upset with it because they think that it's either glorifying gluttony or just making the morbidly obese community look bad, right? Well, I mean, I squashed that, and I said, like, you gotta see this, because he was doing this on purpose. Like, this is not something. It was obvious. I mean, when he would eat, he went off in this whole other zone, you know, where he didn't hear anything, he didn't see anything. He was just, and you could tell he didn't want to do it at times, and he was forcing it down, and that's different than what she was describing. So
I think it's maybe even just a one layer deeper than that, in that, let's go back to the popcorn. You put your popcorn down, and whenever I hear that, and this may not have been what it actually was, but I hear, I'm doing my part to help him stop eating. Like, if I'm eating, I'm helping him eat, and I don't want to feel like I'm helping him eat. And I think the reason he began eating was as a compensation for his boyfriend, or his husband. I don't know if it's clear, you know, what the relationship status was.
Because he said they weren't family. Okay. He couldn't go into the.
That's right. And so his boyfriend starved himself to death, you know, on the cusp of it anyway, before he jumped off the bridge. And so he was watching his boyfriend waste away, and he was trying to compensate by eating. And like by feeding myself, I'm feeding him, and I'm saving his life. I think there was just this emotional trigger that happened in him that began as an emotional compulsion, and then to your point, maybe ended as, I just can't stop now. This is the only way that I know how to move forward. And maybe it's one of those things where depression sometimes is more than just a thing you're suffering from. It's something you're holding on to as a last thread that's connecting you to something else, an event, a person. And the moment that you let your depression go means that you're now moved on from this thing.
That's hard to do.
It's so hard to do. And so for him to have stopped eating would have been a thread cut between him and his boyfriend. And so I think it was that. It was, I'm going to endure this so that I can still feel connected to him.
Great point.
And that's my read on it. I mean, there's probably 1,000, you know, different layers you can view it through, but as good as any, maybe. This whole thing, you know, shredded me in so many scenes. There's that very, very simple scene early on, maybe the first day or the second day, where Liz comes over. Oh man, that first time she comes over and they have that whole conversation, she's checking his heart. Before we know who she is, at first it's like, okay, is she like a visiting nurse? You know, you had these traveling nurses that do their jobs, you know, remotely. And then, you know, something else happens where he just gives her a look, and you don't know what's happening yet. It's just this, he shoots her a look. She kind of looks down and she kind of nods, and she walks over to the kitchen, picks up this massive bucket of fried chicken. She hands it to him. So much happens right there, because I'm judging her. I think that's kind of the point, is to, you know, trigger the audience a little bit into our own judgments and saying, what are you doing? And then, you know, it only takes me a few seconds anyway, for I'm like, at the end of the day, it's his life. Like, if that's what he wants to do, why should she like restrain him and force him to save his life? Which I think is echoed later in the film whenever she and him are talking. And she tells him, I don't think anyone can save anyone. And I think that's true. I don't think anyone can save anyone. If someone does something that hurts themselves, it's not your fault. Like, of course, there's always something you could do. There's something you could try. But ultimately, it's up to ourselves to help ourselves and to ask for help if we need help. And the best that we can do is be there for them when they need that. And what is she going to do? Like, tell him something he doesn't think? Tell him something he doesn't know? Hey, your weight is causing you to kill yourself. Yeah, I'm aware. Can I have my chicken now? Like, what are you supposed to do? And so I think, you know, she's doing the best that she can by making him aware through her medical expertise, as well as loving him. Now, you know, that's the only other thing that can possibly help him at this point is to love him, or at least that's one perspective. I don't know. Maybe some people really need a kick in the ass. And I just think at this point, she's already tried that. I think she's already gone that road. She's also seen exactly that same scenario, because Liz is coming from the perspective of not just watching Charlie do this to himself, but she watched Alan, her brother, do this to himself. So if anyone's in a position to kind of make that judgment between these two people in their lives, it's going to be Liz. And so for her to say that at that point is like, okay, yeah, you know what? You've probably earned the right to say that as much as anyone can. And so, yeah, and then you see him start to choke on the meatball sub, and she's over here having a conversation with him, laughing, joking. And then she turns around and she sees him about to, you know, freaking die. And that becomes this heart-stopping moment. One of the things I really love about this film is they don't shy away from the eating. I think it would be very easy to have someone like that on screen, but never really show them indulging. It would be dishonest. To be a 600-pound person, you eat. There is no other way for that to take place. You're consuming more calories, or at least you've reached an equilibrium of calories to maintain that. And you can't show that kind of, you know, idea on screen without actually allowing them to indulge, and also see them conflicted with it. Like you said, you see him try to stop himself, you know, a few moments. He shuts the door on all the candy. And then he continues. It's like, it's this wrestling match. And I think that's worth sympathizing with. But I appreciate the willingness to show it without making it disgusting. Like, that was the other thing that I really, really appreciated. Like, a lot of other directors would be hacks when they approach this story, by doing all the aggressive sounds and noises. And then I would have left the theater, to be honest. I don't care if it is Aronofsky. I would have left the theater, because it just, it's infuriating. Like, I can't handle it, you know, physically. And so I really appreciate that we watched him eat a number of times, without turning it into this aggressive, let's aggravate the audience kind of approach. Instead, you know, we're just witnesses, and that's it. And that's okay. That's enough, like, for us to, you know, imbibe. But it also, to me, those moments of eating are very much tied into the idea of the whale. And I'll circle back to that in a second, but you made that comment and it's very perceptive on, which is, the writer himself was talking about titling this. And this was on one of those podcasts I listened to. I'll link both of the DGA podcast, the director's cut with Aronofsky talking with Greta Gerwig, about this movie, and as well as, another screenwriter on a Script Apart talking to Samuel Hunter, about writing this thing, both from the screenplay, the play, and adapting it. Like, what did you add? How did you approach it, differently from when you wrote the play? And he was talking about the title. He was like, how did you feel about making this the title? And he was like, originally I didn't have it as a title. I thought about it. And then during some of my early writing process, as I was sharing it with my peers, they challenged me to go there, to title it The Whale. And I think part of that is pushing a button. It's making an audience think it's about one thing and, channeling your preconceived judgments and biases. And then once you actually get in there, you realize, oh, it's not actually a reference to his weight. Crap. Instead, it's about Moby Dick and obsession, right? Every time anyone is talking about Moby Dick, it's a reference to obsession, the white whale, and you're chasing something, not because it really is something you need to chase, but because you're obsessed with it. And obsession is a very, fatal, or maybe not. Sometimes it's good to be obsessed. That's how we get breakthroughs in technology and medicine or whatever. And so it's not, always a negative thing, but, often it's used as a negative metaphor because Moby Dick, I don't think ends very well for anyone. And
I think obsession is generally good for society and bad for the individual.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, we get breakthroughs, but that person has no life.
Right. And so the whale was very, purposeful and its titling to get at a bunch of different things. And yeah, very smart. But then the way it's used in the film itself, I thought was interesting because the essay that she wrote, it was interesting as a first scene to have this guy about to die. And he says, read this to me. And we're like, what is this? Is it going to be like the code to the nuclear launch or what? And he starts reading an essay about Moby Dick and our confusion is right on his face, right? He's like, what is this? What am I doing? Just read. And the urgency is so clear that you're like, just read. Just shut up and read. I don't know why. It'll all make sense at some point, and it doesn't. It never makes sense until much later in the film, whenever you realize this is what Ellie wrote, and this is his connection to her, because he's an English teacher, and he loves that she wrote something so observant and honest. And the part that they repeat, I think, the most is what she says, especially the boring parts, because I knew the author was just trying to save us from his own sad story, if only for a little while. And I think that's what's happening in his eating moments. I think they're channeling that same idea. This is kind of a boring moment. We're just watching someone eat, but they're trying to save us from his sad story by making us watch it. Whether that's, a more literal sense of be conscious of how we live our lives, or if it's more on a similar sense of Moby Dick, and that if we're watching him eat, then we're not watching him tear himself apart in all the other ways with all his other relationships. It's almost a reprieve from the moment he's dying, because if he's eating, yes, it's killing him, but he's not actually dead. He's active. He's doing something. So there's a lot of interesting ways that you can parse her essay with what's happening with him on screen that I found just really, really cool and beautiful. Yeah. I guess my other notes around cinematography were the aspect ratio. It's a 4:3. It's a box, right? It's not literally like a 1:1 perfect square. I think they found that creating a perfect square is actually very uncomfortable for the viewer, whereas making it just slightly wider, it still feels like a square, but it's fine. Like you're okay.
I don't want to watch an Instagram movie. Okay?
Right. And so one of the things that I think is happening is It helps Charlie fill the frame, right? Whether that's in the close-ups or when he's standing more vertical. You can get his entire body in the shot without a lot of extra visual noise. And that, I think, also helps with the drama, right? Being tighter on someone's face helps read the character's emotions by removing all that extra visual noise as well. It narrows our focus almost in the same way that the actual depth of field can help direct your attention. Well, if there's nowhere else to look, you're now being forced to watch this thing, and you're going to be forced into their emotions as well. I think that's really beautiful. I think on another practical level, it's easier to film in a very tight space whenever you're this tight, because it makes it easier to film in all these spaces by keeping it visually interesting. You can break up the character's spaces a little easier if, you know, it's more narrow, as opposed to something like The Hateful Eight, right? It's ultra wide, but you also have all these characters that can fill up the frame, and you want to see where they are in relation to each other, in relation to this one room that we're all inhabiting. As opposed to here, we got like two characters in a scene. We don't want necessarily to see these two characters in the same frame unless we really want them in the same frame. And by narrowing your focus or narrowing the frame, it makes it way easier. Now we can just kind of sit in their frame, and we can separate them emotionally as well as, you know, visually. Those are two in the same. And whenever we move around the apartment, we're not accidentally catching characters that we don't want in there. And so it just turns this little box into a much bigger space by showing less of it at any one point in time. It's a really smart use of aspect ratio. And if I was going to do a one-room shoot, I would be studying this with a handful of others. Maybe Django, that one's kind of rough just because Tarantino is his own monster. But I know they built the set. That was one of the things I picked up on in the podcast. I would not have assumed that this was a built set. I mean, it makes sense because, you know, if you have a few million and this is where you're spending 99% of your time, yeah, build it. Now you can fly things in and out and get to the impossible spaces, and control all the lighting. You can shoot at any time of day and the lighting is all perfectly consistent. That, yeah, if you have the budget, I would not. But I still think there's a lot you can take from it. Another film I would study is Compliance. I think they did a masterful job of shooting in a tight space, because Compliance takes place basically in a closet. Like, you're effectively in like maybe a 10 by 10 space for almost the entire film. Just really, really masterful cinematography there. The other thing I noticed in this is the lights. Really good use of temperatures. Like, you have the lamp that's lighting him for the most part. You have the kitchen fluoro, I think. Or maybe there's another lamp in there. I thought it was a fluoro. You have the TV casting light. You have the window lighting that's this bluish. And so they have a nice variety of temperatures to create visual interest in a closed space. It also helps break up the space a lot, so that if you just had this one main ambient light, the space feels a lot smaller. Whereas if you have one light, the lamp lighting up the couch, then you have another lamp or something lighting up the bookcase, suddenly those feel like two different complete, you know, spaces. And now we can move around that main room a lot easier because it's broken up with the lighting itself. And so in a number of ways, they were just very smart. And Libatique is like he's one of those greats that everyone knows about Deakins. A lot of people know about like Wally Pfister or whoever, some of these other DPs. Libatique he's a G. He's been around. And if you go through his library, you'll see a lot of films that you've watched. Yeah. So that's all I got on cinematography. Yeah, I don't know, man. I think the other thing I couldn't quite nail down was the opening sentences where he's in his classroom. And he says to his students, he says, I know these rules can feel constraining. The point is to be persuasive. And when it comes to that part, I don't know what I'm being persuading on. Like, if we take that as a thesis statement or some kind of thematic statement, I don't really know what necessarily all that is. I know I would think the constraints feel that we're locked in this room with all these people. But I don't know what I would necessarily be persuaded on, other than like everyone is a person. The other thing, I guess, from the screenwriter, he talks about things he added for the film that weren't in the play, which is the pizza guy. I thought the pizza guy was a really important role, because we needed to see a little more judgment. It's everyone entering this guy's life loved him for who he is. Even though Thomas finally admits that, yes, you disgust me. He was still coming around. He was still letting on that he was fine and okie dokie with everything. We needed one really honest person to come in and kind of be the societal standard that is a judgmental piece of shit. And that was our pizza guy. Like, it was really good to have him. And so, because he kept trying to show concern, like, is everything okay in there? And hey, man, I'm Dan or whoever. And he seems like this really friendly guy until he catches a glimpse of Charlie. And then you can see all the judgment. It's right there on his face. You feel it on Charlie. It sends Charlie into an episode where he just devours all this pizza. He's just emotionally devastated by feeling that judgment. The entire reason he doesn't leave half the reason he doesn't leave his apartment. And so having the pizza guy, I thought, was a really smart move. I think that was directed by Aronofsky, if I recall correctly. But yeah, I thought that was just...
You think what was directed by Aronofsky?
Putting in the pizza guy. I think Aronofsky was let's add something, maybe a pizza guy or something. And Hunter was like, what? I don't know if I don't know if I want to add anything. And then the more he started thinking about it, he's like, okay, no, maybe there is a function. And I don't remember everything he said about that, but
that's interesting. So you know that for sure, or you think that? You think that that's a
Yeah, I think that. I think it was one of those, like, our runtime is still a little shallow. Let's flesh it out a little bit more. Who can we add that gives us a sense of timing throughout the week? I can't remember the exact conversation and why he ended up using the pizza guy versus something else. That was just this vague memory that I have of that conversation.
I would like to have been a fly on the wall for that debate, if it was a debate. Like, that would be interesting, of like, the guy who wrote the story being confronted by the guy who's making the movie saying, we need to add something. And then because I'm sure he had the story for years before this. How do you have a story for years and then somebody else comes in and says, you need to add another character that's going to add 7 minutes to the runtime? And you're like, what the F? Are you, what? And then if he was opposed to it at first, what was his mentality? How did he come around? Like, what was it that changed his mind, or that made him realize, or maybe it never changed his mind, but he did it anyway for the film, but he didn't like it, but he did it and why would he do it? Like, I would like to be a fly on the wall for that. That'd be interesting.
That would be. That's one of those things that no one ever talks about. I've mentioned this before with Fincher. Like, just because a director isn't writing the script doesn't mean they're not involved. Like, they're not just handed the script and then say, okay, this is what I got to work with. No, they sit down with the screenwriter and they say, okay, this moment I don't feel like is landing the way we want it to. Because there is a difference between what's on the page versus what works in the edit. Yeah. And there's so many times when something looks really good on the page and it just doesn't work in the edit. Like, I ran into that on a recent short film where I was like, this works so well on the page. And then I got into the edit and I'm like, damn, I'm glad I gave myself an out, because this does not work. It just does not cut. And luckily I thought around that corner. But there is this give and take, and then it's not uncommon either. And you'll hear a lot of screenwriters, upset about this. Directors will take the script and rewrite it. They won't get credit. They'll just rewrite your work. And sometimes for the better, sometimes for the not. And I'm sure a lot of screenwriters will be like, never for the better. But sometimes it is. I mean, it just depends on everything, all the context, who it is that's doing it, what's the goal. But to some degree, at a certain point, you start to wonder, why did the director ever take the script if this is what they were going to do with it? Like, if they didn't want to make my script, why did they buy it? Why are they, signed on to do it? And I think a lot of times is, well, I got funding for it, and therefore I want to make a movie. It doesn't matter. I will turn it into something that I like, which often, if the film landscape is any indication, it often goes wrong. But yeah, it's a tricky process. And, if you're a good director, you understand kind of pacing and why a scene works versus why it doesn't. And you can figure that stuff out either in rehearsal, or you can just see it on the page. I mean, I can go into some scripts and see why something isn't working on the page and why it'll never work on set, let alone in the edit. And I could punch it up right there and be like, no, buddy, you don't want to do that. And here's whatever 5 reasons why. But that's taken a long time. That's taken a lot of trial and error on my part, and also just flat out misreading. This is why I direct my own scripts. I don't direct other people's scripts, because I can't see inside someone else's head on what they intended when they wrote a thing. So it's very unlikely I could be as bold as Aronofsky and take someone else's script and direct it. I'm still honestly shocked that he did. I'm grateful, because I think this is a wonderful film. If for no other reason than, like you said, it gave Brendan Fraser a new life. And I'm really hoping that we'll start seeing him in like Nolan films and Fincher. Like, I just hope everyone's pulling him apart to get back to him. Because he deserves it. God, is he good? God, is he good?
He's really, really good. He's really good. I want him to get that opportunity. I mean, this is an opportunity back, but it's not him back.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, now he needs to do something completely different, and then he's back. That's the way I feel. I feel like a role can define you Christian Bale is a great example of an actor who can do something that you would normally think would pigeonhole them, and then doing something completely different to say, you know what? No, I can also do this. And that's what I want for Brendan. I think this was such a transformational role for him that now no matter what he does is going to be different. So hopefully it's of the caliber. Like, I don't want him to go do a Transformers movie. You know what I mean? Like, I want him to go do, like, I'd love, like you said, a Nolan film, like if he was an Oppenheimer, the new Nolan film coming out, that'd be awesome and perfect. That's the kind of thing, that I hope for him. Something substantial, but completely different.
Yeah. And to me, it should be a lesson to low budget filmmakers.
Yes.
There is a graveyard full of incredible talent. Some of them have been forgotten. Some have not been discovered. And if you don't have the budget to go get, Christian Bale, you might have the budget to go get someone that's looking for an opportunity, to resurrect their career. If you have the material, if you can write the material and get just enough money to make it all work, you can probably make a splash at Sundance, at Cannes, because they're like, oh my God, like, where has this person been? Like or maybe it's a character actor, like Mark Rylance, who was just waiting to get their opportunity to shine. Like J.K. Simmons was playing all these supporting characters before he finally got Whiplash. And then, he was the freaking man. Like, there's so many actors waiting to have a great script handed to them that finally features their talent. And if you can assess talent, it shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be that difficult to go look through a handful of films and say, who's been quiet lately? Fine, let's go ring their bell and give them
and to your point about independent filmmakers, I think also don't worry about getting too complicated on the story, you know, and because there's so many great stories that are just barely stories.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, 2 films in the last 2 years have had actors, comeback actors, right? So who was the kid from Indiana Jones in
Key, yeah.
Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Yeah.
You know, great comeback film for him, right? And everyone was watching that movie thinking, I know who that guy is. How do I know who that guy is? I knew immediately. But Jenny, when she was watching, she was like, I know who that guy is. That is an extremely complicated story with hundreds of locations and just everything all over the place. And this is a completely very simple story. I mean, like there's a lot that happens within, like, you know, if you dig down deep, but it's all in one setting and it's really relying on the acting of like just a couple of people or a few people. And so you can go one way and have it be this gigantic thing, but you can also go small. So if you have no budget but you know how to work a camera and you know how to light a scene, or you know what you don't like, at least, then you can make something, and it doesn't even have to be a feature. It could be like something short, but that says something. Okay, what do you want to say? Okay, say it in 5 minutes. There, get in, get out. You know, if you have a great, just look for a story, look for like something to say, and then you can do that. You don't have to make the big thing. Just make something. And then that will lead to making something else, which will lead to making something else. It's like if you go and work out, you go and work out hard for 90 minutes. You come home, look in the mirror, you see nothing. The next day you go and you work out hard for 90 minutes. You come home, you look in the mirror, you see nothing. The next day you see nothing. But at some point, and I don't, could be weeks, months, you'll look in the mirror and you'll think, oh, something's happened. And that is not because you worked out for 90 minutes hard. It's because you did something every day. It's the consistency, not the effort. So just make stuff and stuff that like is interesting to you. Like don't, make garbage that you just don't care about at the end of the day. And to your point, there's a lot of great talent out there. And it might be hard to find, but if you put your ear to the ground, you can find somebody that if you have a short script, you could go to them and say, hey, I have no money, but I have this great idea. And I think you'd be perfect for it. And I promise you, a lot of actors would be like, I'd be perfect for it? Oh, so this is like basically for me. Okay, cool. And that is what they want. That is what a lot of actors want. They want something that is, basically made for them, that they think no one else could do better than them. Like this is the role of my lifetime. Okay, cool. I don't care about how much money I make. They're artists too. You're an artist with the camera. You're an artist with your pen. They're an artist with their ability with their acting. And so give them the opportunity,
Yeah. Huge. Yeah. Nice. I think that's just about the only other thing that I can remember Aronofsky talking about. He talked about 2 things. One, he liked to shoot. Now I also prefer to be shooting instead of standing around fiddling with lights. But I suspect my version of shoot is very different from Aronofsky's. His version is probably very slow for me just because he's got a built set, and he whenever you need to fly out a wall, that's going to take 10, 15 minutes. You're just kind of hanging out, but it's still comforting to know that that's the way he thinks. And I think there is something to that, giving a flow to the actors, letting them kind of create some momentum, shoot again, run it again. And then once you got it, you can move on. Like I don't do coverage. I'm personally not a fan of coverage. I don't know if he is. I wouldn't suspect that he's a coverage guy. And coverage.
Can you describe that? Can you define that?
For those who don't know, coverage is whenever you have a list of shots that you get in order to cover the entire scene and sequence. And so it usually starts with a master shot, which is very, very wide. And then you move into mediums, and then you move into close-ups, and then you might grab some inserts, and then you might do any specialty shot, like, oh, I want a dolly shot for this line of dialogue. And then you just get that line of dialogue, 8 times in a row, and then you move on. And so whenever you get into the editing room, the editor can construct a scene in a number of different ways. There's so much flexibility to do it. The problem from my point of view is, yes, they're actors, they're professionals, and they're going to bring their A game every time, whatever. They're still human beings. Human beings get tired. And I think if you know exactly what you want to get and how it's going to sit into the edit, just get that. And that way the actors are fresh, they're invigorated. Every take is going to be interesting, and you're giving them a lot of space for the rest of the day. The worst thing in the world is to spend 2 hours on an emotional scene, and it's like they're gassed. Like, if you've never had to get emotional on camera, I don't know any other way to put it other than it's exhausting. Like, imagine going to a funeral and then having to immediately go to a whole new funeral. Like, there's only so much emotion to go around. And that's, somewhat how it feels. Like, you're just very tired, and now you have to channel it all over again. Finding out what actors can do that, and which need more time and space is very important to a director. And so for me, I don't want to do the whole wide unless I know I want this wide, and I'm not going to get a medium unless I know I'm going to use this medium. It's inefficient. You can get more done, and you can just spend more time acting. It's so much more fun to watch an actor do a scene than it is to have them sitting around waiting on a light to get set up, or this diffusion to fly in, or whatever. Like, I much rather, like, anything that can be done in the next 30 to 60 seconds, let's do that while I'm moving the camera. If it's going to take much longer than that, it better have a really nice payoff. And to me, I'd rather get like 90% there and save myself 15, 20 minutes of setup than go 100% and then lose 2-3 other shots, or, another 2-3 takes that I could have got instead. And that's much more useful in my editing room than, getting that perfect backlight or rim light. I actually hate rim lights, but a reverse key, now that's my shit, because there's not a lot to do once you set it up. You can kind of just start flying around, and at the most you might bring in like some neg fill or that kind of thing. Anyway, so him on set, he was saying that, I like to just be shooting. And this was a pretty short shoot. I forget how long he had. I want to say it was like 28 working days, maybe something like that. But pretty fast, for this level of talent that, that's walking around on set. Very impressive. The other thing he mentioned was he wouldn't do it unless he got the technology right with the fat suit, so to speak. And it was amazing. Like the special effects makeup work on that is absolutely incredible. He was like, you see some of these this makeup job where it's covering their mouth and comes up to their jaw. It's like, I didn't want to do any of that. That's you can just see when they talk and when they move around, it doesn't look real. And you immediately eject. And so I worked for a while, I forget how long, but several months at least, but maybe a year or more, with his makeup person to get that practical effect, just right. And
it looked amazing.
I bought it, right? And Brendan was like, do you want me to put on more weight? He's like, no, don't. You're good, bro.
No, please.
You're good. We'll handle it on our end. Yeah. And so I'll link both of those episodes with the screenwriter and playwright, as well as the one with Aronofsky, because I think they're really quick, easy, interesting listens. Whenever you're listening to pros really dive into their process, I just love it so much.
Awesome.
Yeah. Final thoughts, man?
Awesome. Fantastic film. Absolutely loved it. I hope he wins Best Actor. I think he completely deserves it. I don't know who he'd be going up against. I don't know. But anyway, I think it's fantastic, and I'm happy that he's back, and I'm happy that this exists for him, and I hope that that Brendan Fraser has a long rest of his career, because it's fantastic. So yeah, I loved it. I loved it. It's inspiring.
Nice. Same. Okay. Well, what are you going to recommend this week?
Yeah, this week I'm going to recommend the first episode of on Netflix of this series called Full Swing. It is, I know, it's a golf series, right? It's a documentary, and it follows golfers. And the first episode is an episode that follows two best friends, Jordan Spieth and Justin Thomas. I used to be a golfer. Like, I used to love playing golf. So I know these guys. I've followed these guys, but it's the way that they create the story is really interesting, because Jordan Spieth is like the top guy. He's like world number one top guy, and his friend Justin is like always been beneath him, right? And has always tried to catch up to Jordan. And what happens at the end is just so rewarding. I mean, I was sitting there watching it, and I was like freaking out. It's just so rewarding that it's worth the 50 minutes episode to watch it. Even if you don't like golf, if you just like stories that are real, like this really happened. It's just so inspiring and beautiful and wonderful, and doesn't matter if you like golf or not. It's just like really, really cool. So the first episode of Full Swing.
Nice. Well done.
Yeah.
I am going to recommend, this is going to sound so dumb, but I'm going to recommend an air fryer. And so
It does sound dumb.
Yeah,
You're right.
Yeah,
It does.
Really dumb.
I'm just kidding.
And so if, I don't know, I think one of the hardest things, watching this movie about a guy struggling with his weight, more or less. And I don't know, I have, family that are basically, on this level. And it sucks because people have talked to them and tried to help, but at the end of the day, maybe no one can save anyone. And so I don't know, if you're someone who, I think most of America is in this place where we want to lose an extra 10 or 20 pounds, and we'd be okay with that. And so if that's you, I have an episode 98, where I discuss like how I lost 45 pounds and my 3 rules of fat loss or whatever. But on a more practical level, it's just, for me, I'm dieting right now. I just finished a bulk that was very mid, and now I'm leaning up again to give it another go. And it's a lot of cooking, at home. And I think this is the hard part about losing weight in America, is we have an abundance of very cheap processed food. It's delicious. And it's hard to get off of that. And once you do, food tastes really, really good. If you cook it at home, and if you use a few basic ingredients, you can get very full on far fewer calories and enjoy your food so much more. I don't know how many times I've ever eaten out and felt better afterwards whenever I eat like fast food. Like, as much as I really enjoy Taco Bell, I don't think there's ever been a single meal from Taco Bell that I felt good afterwards. Like, that crunch is good, the taste is good, and then I feel trashed. And most eating out experiences are like that. Not all. There's a lot of really good restaurants that will give you the right amount of portions so that you feel satisfied without feeling gross and whatnot. But I just think, man, the hardest part is getting used to normal food again. And once you get there, like, losing weight or feeling better in your body begins to get so much easier. And I think one of the secrets that I've had is not frying my food, instead using something like an air fryer. I use it almost every day. Using your oven. The oven feels a lot more time consuming, right? It has to heat up, and you just look at it and you're like, I don't know what people will use that thing for. And so one of my go-tos lately has been like a baked potato with a couple of eggs on top. Or like baked chicken, but maybe instead of in the oven, I throw it in the air fryer, and it gives it that same kind of fried texture without any of the grease, without any of the fried fat. And so the calories are cut in like half because you're not deep frying it in Crisco. And so being able to like use something like that for potatoes, now you can have French fries or whatever. It gives you that same satisfied crunch and some of that same satisfying sensation without actually destroying your calorie count for the day. So my recommendation is an air fryer and Whole Foods. I know Whole Foods are not exactly revolutionary in concept, but if you pay the piper for a couple of weeks, it starts to taste really good. A fucking carrot tastes magical once you're not having, all these Cokes and sodas crammed down your gullet. Suddenly like, oh, I can taste the carrot again. I can taste a potato with a little olive oil. It tastes amazing. It's delicious. And so I'm not quite on a Mediterranean diet, but I borrow some of that same ideas. Olive oil, a lot of olive oil that isn't fried. That's literally just poured on top of my potato. And Todd, it's delicious and it's spectacular.
That's fantastic.
Sorry, I'm a nerd.
Right.
Yeah. Stay tuned for next week. We're going to take a look at Barbarian, the, horror film, I suppose, from Zach Kreger. And I think that's streaming somewhere right now. Maybe HBO. I've already forgotten. But it is streaming on one of the main services. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, drop us a review, leave us a note if you want us to talk about a thing. Shout out once again to last week, Uva, requesting Jerry Maguire. Hope you dug that one, my friend. And if anyone else has a request, let us know. We have some interesting guests coming up in the next month or two that we're excited to get to, and some other stuff. A lot of fun coming down the pipe. And if you want to leave a note on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/the whale.
And our quote of the day today is from Darren Aronofsky. I'd like to do a lot of different stuff. I think it's important as a creative person to keep challenging yourself and keep doing new stuff. If you end up trying to repeat yourself, it's death. It just becomes boring and takes the passion out of it. You got to find stories and characters that you really want to hang out with. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
You were it's so talking easy about that, right? With Christian Bale.
Yeah. Huh. Exactly. It's so easy to like do something and you love it and you're proud of it and to go down this rabbit hole of trying to do that again. But part of the reason why you grabbed that in the first place because it was different from the thing before. And so just keep doing new things, different things, but also being aware of what your desire is. I lose that all the time. I got to say this. I lose my direction constantly, and I'm always trying to refine it and which is fine. But being honest with what that might be in the moment, like if I just wrote a pop song, but I really don't like it or I don't want to write it again, then I'm going to work on something completely different. And all of a sudden I feel inspired again. Or if I'm going to, if I just watch, kind of bubblegum film, but I don't want to watch something like that again, I'll watch an art film, and all of a sudden like new synapses are connected in my brain and I feel something else, right? It's all about the feeling, right? So I think it's a great quote.
That's really cool. And I love that because if you look through his catalog, it's true. He's not doing the same thing. Like they all might be dramas, but that's about the extent of it. There's not a lot of overlap between Black Swan and The Wrestler. Those are two very different ideas, even though they might have a lot of the same texture and a lot of the same, things underlying it in terms of technique, but they're not the same movie. It's not like, he's out here doing whatever, Black Swan and some other psychological horror. Like that's, I love his approach to stories, like to go from that to Noah, this really high budget, CGI biblical film, and then move right to Mother, this like terrifying, like personal, also religious film. Like it's just really fascinating to watch his career go. The Fountain versus The Whale have absolutely no overlap other than Darren Aronofsky. Like, it's just him. He is the overlap. I love that approach because, that's such a good observation. The thing that drew you to that thing that was a success or that you really loved doing it was that it was fresh, that it was new and different from whatever you had just done. And so I think you can apply that in so many ways, certainly in art, but even in just life and work. Like, if you're not scaring yourself a little bit with taking on a challenge, maybe you don't feel alive. Maybe it's time to feel alive.
Yeah. Great point. Great quote. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. I had a great time. I loved this film. Hopefully you did too. Like Wes said, please subscribe, review us on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. All of it helps a lot. And let us know if there's a film that you'd like to see us cover. Maybe we'll cover it. But we love hearing from you either way. Until next week, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.